Hi everyone, my name is Carlin and I'm the caricature supervisor at Hershey Park. In this video, I'm going to be talking about using color in the drawing process. Upselling is one of my favorite things to do, especially when it's convincing people that drawings look better when they have color rather than just black and white. The truth is, there's nothing different about the drawing, it's just adding color. This can allow the drawing to feel more three-dimensional and lifelike. Now, the next step in the drawing process is following through with that idea. Remember, if the customer decides that they would like a colored drawing, they're not going to pay for a white sheet of paper. Apply the color generously, but make sure that you are mindful of their skin tone. Typically, I use the same 4 colors for different skin tones, but feel free to mix it up. Don't be afraid to experiment with other colors that may be found in the skin, like reds or purples. Even within the skin tone, there can be different shades of those skin tones. For example, I could have the same skin tone as someone else, but if I see inside more than they do, my skin may be paler than theirs. The lighter you press on the color stick, the paler the person will appear in the drawing. On these 2 slides, I've included a demonstration of the 4 colors I use for skin tones and what they look like at 3 varied pressures. You may not be able to tell just by looking at them, but in each one of the spheres on the first 2 slides, I've added just a little bit of pink or purple to add a natural blush. While you can definitely get by without it, I think adding the extra color to show at least a little bit of blush really adds another dimension to the drawing. One thing you may have noticed is that in every sphere so far, I've colored it with a highlight to show where the light source is coming from. One super important thing to note is the color of the highlight. The lighter skin tones can be highlighted nicely with just a little bit of white from the page. As you get into the darker skin tones, however, the white of the page can be much more noticeable. You may want to consider the highlight as a lighter shade rather than leaving it plain white. What you definitely don't want is the customer pointing out a white spot on the page and asking you why didn't you color it, or why is that part white? You may have the intention of giving them a highlight, but keep in mind that they may not have the artistic knowledge that you do. That being said, you have many opportunities to demonstrate your knowledge of highlights and shadows because the face is composed of shapes. Let's see if we can identify how many shapes are visible in the partial face on this slide. First, there is the sphere of the cheek on the left. Next, the sphere of the nose. Third is the rectangular shape of the bridge of the nose. And lastly, the sphere of the right cheek. Did you find all 4? If so, give yourself a pat on the back. On this slide, you can see a little test drawing I've made to show all the shapes that can be shown in the face. Now keep in mind, there can be more, less, or an equal number of these. Every face is unique though, and you have to keep that in mind. The shapes can, and most likely will, be different in every face you draw. Don't mark up the shapes like I did on this one, because I'm sure the customer would not be too pleased with that, but definitely think about which parts of the face are what shapes when you begin coloring. Let your prior knowledge of highlights and shadows take over. Next, I want to talk about a little bit about unique features that you may come across when drawing someone, such as freckles, piercings, or facial hair. If you're drawing for comments for the first time, every person will likely have something about them that you've never drawn before. It's alright to be nervous, but don't let the customers know that you are. You are a professional artist, and they don't know anything about you except for that. This will be my 6th summer working at Commons, and I still have people not like my drawings. Sometimes they even prefer art drawn by a first-year artist, and that's okay. This will hopefully give you an idea of how to start with these new features. Eventually, you'll develop your own style and way of drawing, and I can't wait to see what that is. So, the first feature that you may come across is freckles. This is a feature that's pretty common, usually for kids. Notice small details like this. The parents may say something like, "They even got your freckles," and it can be a self-confidence booster for you and the customer. You know that you are starting to gain a likeness of your customer, and your customers know that you are paying attention to them and really doing your best to make sure the drawing looks like them. I usually try to avoid going in and drawing black dots with the marker because it can come across as something people consider gross, such as blackheads or acne. Sometimes people opt to draw the black dots with markers, and it can be a little bit staged and less natural. Try to avoid this. Freckles are natural brown dots, and they are certainly unpredictable. I go straight in with an appropriate brown color stick and draw the dots as I see fit. The next feature you may come across is piercings. This can be another thing that people may be surprised that you notice. Piercings can be in many places on the face, but today I just wanted to focus on the nose piercing in particular. Treat it like a sparkle. Think of it as something else affected by the highlight. It is going to catch your eye, right? It may be shiny or sparkly, but there is no doubt that it is something that makes their face different from someone else's. Do not make it overbearing, but think about making it noticeable. You also have to think really smart. If you use a blue to make the piercing appear shiny, think about how that's going to look on different skin tones. If you use it on a lighter skin tone, it may be alright, but if you use it on a more yellow skin tone, it may come across as green, and you don't want that. Consider using a different color. Use your knowledge of color theory to your advantage. The last thing you're definitely going to come across is facial hair. Here is a pretty straightforward example of someone who has a mustache, but facial hair can present itself in about 100 different ways. It can be stubble or even a full beard. Facial hair can be really interesting. Think about it in relation to the hair on top of the man's head. Is it the same color? Is it different? Are there different colors in the beard? If it is stubble, I usually go in with a light shade of gray on top of the skin tone. But those colors alter varied by what the skin tone actually is. Now, I have had horror stories about completely forgetting to add the facial hair on a man, so make sure you keep those things in mind when you're drawing someone. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about is hair color. This is something I've struggled with for a really long time, and I think I'm just starting to get the hang of it. There are so many different hair colors, natural and unnatural. Put a lot of effort in when you're coloring the hair, and feel free to play around with lines and strokes that you see in the hair. Not only are there many colors of hair, but there are also a lot of textures. If you put a lot of pressure when using color, it can cover up some of the line work in the area, so consider using just the color stick to make those lines. Do they have curly hair, straight? Is it kind of wavy? Demonstrate that when you're using the color stick to add the color. Use your same knowledge of highlights and shadows when coloring the hair. Where the hair is the highest will be the spot where the highlight is, and the lowest parts will be the shadows. I often use more than one color in the hair because I don't think there is anyone alive who has one solid color of hair. I personally have sandy blonde hair, and it has often been mistaken for a reddish blonde or even just plain brunette hair. When people mess up my hair color, I think it ends up not looking like me. So take it from me that if you mess up a hair color, it can absolutely destroy the likeness you may have developed already in the face. When it comes to people who have black hair, put time and effort into making sure it's as dark as possible. You don't want someone asking why they have gray hair. That's for sure. I hope this video has clarified some things about color that you may not have known before when drawing caricatures. Thanks so much for tuning in.